We are talking about clogging of vessels. That is the one which carries the pure blood and also the one which carries the impure blood. That is the arterial embolism as well as the venous embolism. So how will we manage? So my thread of talk would be, we'll first discuss a case scenario, just discuss some basic points, and check out what the stroke scenario is in the world, India, and in this part of the country, about the venous thromboembolism basics, and then assess the gravity of the situation and learn about the venous thromboembolism prophylaxis and management based on the guidelines. And since you are at home right now, let's have some take hospital points after that. Who is a 79-year-old female with left hemiplegia, and her NIHS score was 12. So that is, she was severely debilitated with a weakness of 0/5 power in the left side with gaze preference towards the right. This indicates that she was having a severe stroke, and her window period was about 3 hours. So this is the golden period, and we have to thrombolize the patient, and hence we thrombolize the patient. So after thrombolizing the patient, the question in our mind, she is having severe immobility, and it may take time for her to recover even with if we thrombolize the patient, because as you see in this diffusion weighted image, that is which denotes the acute stroke, indicates the acute stroke, that the lesion is very large. So it may take time. Will we give a DVT prophylaxis, and if yes, when, and with what agent would we give, and how long? This is a very confusing question, a very difficult question to answer. So by the end of this talk, I expect all to try to solve this problem for all of us when we are seeing such kind of patients in our day-to-day clinical practice. Now another scenario which I took from a Western journal is a different one, in which this is about a 75-year-old man who also had a large middle cerebral artery ischemic stroke. He didn't have any clinical evidence of deep vein thrombosis, and usually they go in for a routine surveillance of lower vein extremity Doppler scan, and in which he was found to be having a large right femoral DVT. So his femoral vein was clogged, which suggests that the proximal deep vein was thrombosed, and this is actually a grave problem, because it is more likely to embolize and enlarge and extend to, and more likely to develop a pulmonary embolism. And because of the size of the infarct, they were concerned about the hemorrhagic transformation, and an inferior vena cava filter was placed in a patient. You may think that this is a simple thing. Inferior vena cava filter placement causes in an Indian scenario about nearly about 2 lakh rupees. So that is the importance of gravity of the situation. So if you see, this is an inferior vena cava filter, and the thrombus would have been nearly in the femoral vein. So to prevent this from causing a pulmonary embolism, they have prophylactically added a IVC filter. So a patient with ischemic stroke can safely be given anticoagulants for treatment for DVT or pulmonary embolism. This is the comment from that journal. All patients with ischemic stroke should be given VTE prophylaxis with either heparin or low molecular weight heparin. So that is the importance they give for thromboembolism prophylaxis in Western countries, and we are actually a bit confused regarding how to go about with the thromboembolism prophylaxis in our patients. So let us try to solve this by knowing more about the basics regarding these two, this condition or this problem. So as we know, we have the artery and the vein, and the clogging of the both vessels result in problems. So the prototype of the arterial occlusion is actually our stroke and the myocardial infarction, and venous occlusion results in DVT and pulmonary embolism. So veins have got valves, and their flow is steady because it is not attached with the heart. And in the legs, we have what is called a second heart, that is the gastrocnemius soleus, which pumps the blood back to the heart. The difference between the arterial and the venous thrombus is that the arterial thrombus is actually the white thrombus made basically of platelets. That is why our antiplatelets acts. But it would be foolish to think that the antiplatelets would prevent a venous thrombosis to occur, because the venous thrombus is made up of a red thrombus, and it is due to basically defect in the coagulation factors. And we need to have an anticoagulant acting to prevent a venous thrombosis from occurring. Arterial thrombus, as we have discussed, it occurs when there is an obstruction of flow. The arterial thrombus occurs in the retrograde fashion, that is in the opposite direction of the flow, and the venous thrombosis occurs along the direction of the flow of the veins. And nothing need to be told about the stroke, about its global scenario. The stroke has been increasing day by day because of the increase in the lifestyle diseases. But with the advent of the newer technology and the treatment, from 1996 we have approval of the alteplase, that is the IV thrombolytic agent, and now we have the newer agent tenecteplase, and newer agents are coming which are better with less bleeding risk. And also from 2015 many new endovascular procedures have come into existence and have increased the survival of the stroke patients and reduce the mortality. But what it has increased is that these stroke patients remain bedridden for about 3 months following the stroke, at least for 3 months, because it takes time for the patient to improve. So at these 3 months it's very critical, because they remain immobilized in the bed. And we treat the patient of a stroke patient with thrombolysis or thrombectomy, endovascular treatment, and we think that our job is over. But it's not, because these patients, when remain immobilized, there is stasis of blood, and there is high likelihood that they develop these kind of venous thromboembolism. Either DVT or pulmonary embolism may be visible to our eyes, or non-symptomatic to the patient, or maybe asymptomatic to the patient. So the scenario is globally and occurring. And India, the problem is that our population in the elderly group is increasing. The problem in stroke is basically the circulatory stasis, because the patient become immobile and there is stasis. We may think that in stroke only circulatory stasis occurs, but the hypercoagulability and vascular damage also, these three forms the Virchow's triad, as we have studied in pathology and all physiology. Virchow's triad. In stroke, basically the primary problem is the stasis. But the problem with stroke is that if you see stroke, the patient with stroke further can develop sepsis, or the patient may undergo major surgery, can undergo hemicranectomy, or may undergo endovascular procedures. So then this problems with hypercoagulability also adds in. Also, a patient with stroke may have an inherent tendency to have a thrombophilia. Then also hypercoagulability adds in. Also, these patients, we put in multiple catheters and multiple IV lines, and then the venous problems or the breakage in blood vessels also happens. So the confounding factors of this Virchow's triad adds to the insult, and then hence results in an increased thrombosis risk in these stroke patients, which we cannot turn a blind eye to. And then comes the problem of venous thromboembolism. So we'll just emphasize on this problem, what the gravity of the situation is. As you all know, it is actually the clogging of the deep vein, we call it DVT, and the clogging of the lungs vein, pulmonary vein, we call it as the pulmonary embolism. How it presents is actually basically rubor, calla, dollar, tumor, etc. That will be presenting as DVT, deep pain in the legs. It could be either in the below the knee or above the knee. We call it as distal or proximal. And pulmonary embolism will present as shortness of breath, chest pain, rapid heart rate, etc., etc. The problem of venous thromboembolism in a stroke patient is that it is unlike other patients. The stroke patient may be unable to tell their problems to either the bystanders or to the treating physician, because they may be aphasic, they may be debilitated, they may be maybe due to the affection of the particular area in the brain, they may be unable to converse or tell the problem to them. Or maybe the physician or the treating person may think that this is due to the problem with the stroke. The DVT, they may think that the patient is not moving their leg because of the weakness. or they may think that the breathlessness is due to an aspiration pneumonia. So that is the problem in case of venous thromboembolism in case of stroke, and this may remain unidentified. So this is a case. This shows a lower knee DVT, and this is actually proximal DVT. You can see the swelling and the change in color. And in proximal DVT, the problem is that it will extend into the pulmonary circulation fast and result in severe chest pain and breathlessness, and result in a fatal pulmonary embolism. So you know in DVT can be found out with basically the clinical findings and also by the testing. High index of suspicions need to be kept in mind. In pulmonary embolism, we have the other clinical modalities, investigational modalities with chest X-ray, ECG. ECG basically will show as tachycardia or specific finding of S1, Q3, T3, or the other sign, Pallas sign, etc., or the echo finding of McConnell sign. So just to emphasize, I'll just show you this. So in a normal person, when they are walking, this gastrosoleus will be compressing on the vein, and we have the valvular system. The normal flow is maintained. There is no much of a problem. There is no clogging. But once the patient is bedridden, what happens is there is stasis, that is immobility. And as I told upon this, and that is hypercoagulability if the patient have acquired or inherited thrombophilia or a damage to the vessel and the vein, and this clot which forms similar to a clot in the heart, the clot in the vein goes up through the inferior vena cava to the right atrium and to the pulmonary circulation, causing a damage to the pulmonary emboli. So the gravity of the situation is that DVT of lower extremities is in any patient is a main source of pulmonary embolism, and mortality is about 25%. So, and 7-day mortality is still high, that is 3/4. And for even asymptomatic DVT, the patient not complaining of any pain or any problem in the leg still can have fatal pulmonary embolism of about 15%. So other factors, one study had shown that even obesity, cigarette use, male sex, social economic status, and blood pressure more than 100 can increase the venous thromboembolism. Adding insult, hereditary and acquired thrombophilia also produce problems. So in stroke, as discussed earlier, the complication is about 75% of stroke patients may develop DVT if not given adequate prophylaxis. And pulmonary embolism is can cause about 75% of early post-stroke deaths. One study is there, that is PREVAIL study, which showed that about 50% of strokes can stroke patients can result in DVT. And if DVT remains there and the patient in a stroke patient, we have to have a high index of suspicion and for pulmonary embolism. So how will you detect it? There is a scoring system. You must already be knowing it. That is about the Wells scoring system. So Wells scoring system suggests to carefully examine the patient, look at the ECG, look at the patient, and score the patient. So if the score is less than 4, we can be relieved. But if the score is more than 4, we have to be careful and investigate the patient for pulmonary embolism. So investigating the patient for pulmonary embolism, we can go in first with the D-dimer testing. D-dimer testing has actually a negative predictive value, which means that if the D-dimer is less than 500, we can think that the patient doesn't have a pulmonary embolism. But if the D-dimer is more than 500, it means that the patient can have a pulmonary embolism and should be further tested with a spiral CT or a perfusion scan for further confirming the diagnosis. So prevention is better than cure. So better to avoid this kind of problems, that is either DVT or pulmonary embolism, and start the patient on VT prophylaxis if the patient develops stroke. So what are our armamentarium? What are there in our armamentarium to treat a patient with stroke with to avoid this kind of problems. So we have the mechanical prophylaxis and the pharmacological prophylaxis. The mechanical prophylaxis is actually intermittent pneumatic compression, not the usual compression stockings we give. That is not at all recommended. We have to give the intermittent pneumatic compression. And the pharmacological, we have the wide armamentarium of all the drugs, the heparins, the factor 10 inhibitors, warfarin, etc. And also the newer NOACs, the newer oral anticoagulants. The newer ones, we cannot now call it as newer ones because they were actually 2010 was the time when they were actually FDA approved. So it is nearly 10 years, more than 10 years they have been approved. So now it's no longer new. And these are the IPC, otherwise called intermittent pneumatic compressions. This should be started immediately when the patient gets admitted, provided the patient doesn't have a evident DVT, that is a stroke patient coming to us and we treat the patient should be and have a significant immobility. We should start the patient on IPC, that is intermittent pneumatic compression, and later we can plan to start on the pharmacological prophylaxis. So this was the CLOUD 3 trial which said that IPC, that is intermittent pneumatic compression in stroke, is actually effective in reducing the risk of DVT. And regarding the parenteral anticoagulants, time tested ones were heparin and low molecular weight heparin. Low molecular weight heparin have always had an upper hand, but only in case of renal failure, unfractionated heparin has got a better profile. And in case of prophylactic dose, unfractionated heparin usual dose is actually 5000 units sub-Q twice or thrice a day. Some people give it as IV also, but ideally is to give sub-Q BD or TID. Enoxaparin dosage is actually 40 milligram sub-Q OD. This is the prophylactic dose in stroke patients for DVT prophylaxis. But always we have to look for the creatinine clearance. So we have to check the creatinine clearance of the patient. And in case of, there should be a caution while using the this enoxaparin, that is low molecular weight heparin in elderly over 75 years. Dalteparin and fondaparinux are tried, but less data are there. And always low molecular weight heparin is preferred over unfractionated heparin. And also tensaparin, nadoparin, etc. are also used. So once DVT occurs or pulmonary embolism occurs, we have to give a therapeutic dosage of anticoagulation. And the unfractionated heparin dose is 80 units per kilogram bolus followed by 18 units. And the target APTT is 1.5 to 2 times the normal. Enoxaparin is 1 milligram per kg sub-Q BD. And others are not recommended in the patients. Before that, I'll tell you regarding the pulmonary embolism. Pulmonary embolism is actually a medical emergency. So in that case, we have to be having a clinical diagnosis based on the investigations, as I told you earlier, based on the D-dimer, as well as the perfusion scan or the spiral CT that the patient is having pulmonary embolism. And if the patient is hemodynamically stable, we can go ahead with the anticoagulation. Anticoagulation as we have the therapeutic dose. But if the patient is having unstable or hemodynamically unstable pulmonary embolism, we can give antithrombolytic therapy, that is IV alteplase can be given. The dosage of IV alteplase in case of an hemodynamically unstable pulmonary embolism is usually 100 milligram to be given over 2 hours. That is the ideal dosage. And as I told you, in ischemic stroke, we shouldn't deter from giving a pharmacological prophylaxis along with the mechanical prophylaxis in the form of intermittent pneumatic compression in patients. And always low molecular weight heparin is preferred. And in patients, we know that we give patients anticoagulation in case of cardioembolic stroke or in the case of dissection, or when indicated, we may give anticoagulation in stroke, not in the acute setup. The latest AHA guidelines say that never give acute, in case of acute ischemic stroke, never give anticoagulation initially. We give only antithrombolytic or antiplatelet, not anticoagulation in the initial acute ischemic phase. In such a case, if you are giving therapeutic anticoagulation in in ischemic stroke, we needn't give additional prophylactic anticoagulation. And the same guidelines we are just telling. And in case of a thrombolized patient, along with we have to give pharmacological prophylaxis for DVT, and can be delayed up to 24 hours. You shouldn't have in your mind that this DVT prophylaxis shouldn't be given, or it will cause a bleed in such a patient. And after thrombolysis, and in patients without any thrombolysis, that is acute stroke patient, we are not thrombolizing the patient. We should start, as told earlier, intermittent pneumatic compression should be given, and low dose heparin should be started, provided patient shouldn't be having a minor stroke with a dual antiplatelet therapy. That is, a minor stroke definitely needn't have a thromboprophylaxis. Only if there is a significant immobility, then only we need to start the patient on thromboprophylaxis. This is from the PREVAIL study, which shows that enoxaparin is preferable to unfractionated heparin for VTE prophylaxis. So this is from the latest AHA guidelines, that is American Heart Association guidelines, which says that immobile patients without any contraindications, definitely we have to give intermittent pneumatic compression. That is the class 1 evidence. So definitely we have to go ahead with that. And if you see the last line, in the ischemic stroke patients, elastic compression stocking never should be used. We can see even nowadays in the wards that patients are having elastic compression stockings. It could do more harm and create more DVT chance in such patients, and especially in case if the DVT is more proximal, or the patient has severe immobility, there can be an increased chance of more proximal DVT and further chance of pulmonary embolism if we put on elastic compression stockings. And definitely there is a class 2B evidence to start subcutaneous heparin, or either unfractionated or low molecular weight heparin, according to AHA guidelines. Similarly, American Chest Physicians guidelines also says in similar lines, that is to go with prophylaxis and avoid stockings. And regarding intracranial hemorrhage, stroke could be either a ischemic stroke or a hemorrhagic stroke. We talked about ischemic stroke, but we should, about 15% of the strokes we see are actually hemorrhagic stroke. It could be either a intracerebral hemorrhage or a subarachnoid hemorrhage. We should, in such patients also there will be immobility. So in such patients, we can wait up to 2 to 4 days, and we shouldn't think that this is a bleed and we needn't put on prophylaxis in patient. So in such patients also we can start on a DVT prophylaxis, provided the bleeding has subsided. So we have to make sure the bleeding has decreased, and then start on the prophylaxis. So how to make sure that the bleeding has subsided? It's difficult, because actually 2 to 4 days we can wait. We can take 2 repeat CTs in such a patient and assess the bleeding status. And also in CT we have something called as a CT spot sign. If you take a CT, contrast CT of the ICH patient, you can see here that there is a CT spot sign. This suggests that the patient's bleed is likely to increase. In such patients, never put them on DVT prophylaxis with the anticoagulant. This is the Neurocritical Care Society guidelines, which also tells everything in the similar lines. So this was our first case, the case scenario. Let's try to answer this. So this patient, 79-year-old female with severe immobility of the left side, and window period of 3 hours, thrombolized. So always the confusion would come in our mind whether a thrombolized patient should be, whether to put on DVT prophylaxis. So first question which will be coming to our mind is whether we have to put, and then with what we will be putting and how long. So the first answer would be, definitely we wait for 24 hours. We can take a repeat CT. Definitely we will be taking a repeat CT for this patient, because we have thrombolized the patient, check for bleed, and after 24 hours we can better put enoxaparin. If you see, in this patient we reduce the dose of enoxaparin to 30, because this patient is an aged patient, that is age more than 75. In age more than 75 and in creatinine clearance less than 30, we have to be careful and reduce the dosage of enoxaparin to 30. And studies on newer anticoagulants, NOACs, are going on, and we'll get an answer to whether they can be used fully for this DVT prophylaxis in case of stroke in coming times. And also, all the studies have used these DVT prophylaxis for 10 days. And there is something called extended thromboprophylaxis, but most of the studies say that increasing the prophylaxis to more than 28 days has yielded good benefits, that is less of DVT, but they have significantly increased the bleeding risk. So considering the risk benefit ratios, most of the studies say that DVT prophylaxis of 10 days is more than enough in a normal patient. If the patient have a other provoked factors like a thrombophilia, inherited thrombophilia condition, etc., then the DVT can regarding prophylaxis, we can restrict it to 10 days. But if the patient had developed a DVT, then the DVT can be treated in further other ways as a normal DVT. So normal DVT treatment, we can continue the treatment even up to 1 year, and even newer oral anticoagulants like dabigatran, rivaroxaban, etc. Can be given in case of DVT as such for treatment. So I think in a nutshell, we have tried to give importance to the prophylaxis, that is DVT prophylaxis, and importance to avoid pulmonary embolism in case of stroke patients, which is actually usually missed in case of stroke patients because we are afraid of the bleeding risk when adding anticoagulation. So the take hospital points would be awareness of venous thromboembolism and its asymptomatic type, that is asymptomatic DVTs, etc., and its impending complications as major cause of sudden death following stroke is very necessary. And we should know that the graduated compression stockings, which we usually used to use, are not at all recommended for VT prophylaxis in acute stroke of any type. And low molecular weight should be used for DVT prophylaxis along with mechanical prophylaxis, that is with intermittent pneumatic compression. And therapeutic anticoagulation is now not used in stroke. Therapeutic anticoagulation means acute stroke. We never use anticoagulation. It was used before 1996 when acute stroke comes. Heparin was loaded and given and all. But now the treatment is basically thrombolysis and thrombectomy. And in post-surgical cases and ICH patients, we are afraid in starting DVT prophylaxis, but most of the guidelines, the ACCP guidelines and the AHA guidelines and Critical Care Society guidelines all have come up with the thing that with the neurosurgeon's consent and after making sure that the bleed has subsided, definitely go for DVT prophylaxis because pulmonary embolism subsequent to a DVT is more dangerous. Always we have to customize our treatment based on the risk-benefit ratio. And NOACs are not evaluated for VT prophylaxis, but NOACs are already in use for treatment of DVT and pulmonary embolism. And always we have to have a high index of suspicion in case of both DVT and pulmonary embolism. As in case of brain, time matters, and prompt treatment can save lives in such patients. So that was regarding venous thromboembolism in stroke. Thank you everyone.